This is The Last of Us Part 2. The review code was provided by Sony Interactive Canada, and now we're going to jump in. So this is a very strict review in terms of what I can discuss. It should be spoiler free, but generally go over the gameplay and the mechanics at play. This is also all B-roll provided by Sony at 4K from the PlayStation 4 Pro. I was not allowed to showcase any of my gameplay at this point. So this is what I would consider to be the defining technical game of the PlayStation 4 in terms of the technology and the power at play with what this game provides. This has probably the most stunning character models ever created. They're so lifelike, how they react, how they feel. This is a very emotionally driven game. This is a tale of revenge and anger, and it really does a great job of humanizing the perspectives and the characters that are involved within this narrative. And I can't really talk about some things that I'd really like to talk about, but I'm going to do something afterwards to kind of go over that when I'm allowed to. In this title, you're playing as Ellie. A switched perspective if you're coming from the first game. You can jump into this title without having played the first and enjoy the narrative entirely the whole way through. So this game is really great. I played a whole 15 hours without a single loading screen. It was largely a flawless experience. I had 2 crashes that were present, but I mean, overall in the gameplay and how much time you get, that's absolutely nothing. So no loading screens, no stops in your play. Most environments are done in a linear way with some elements of choice, but there are a couple pockets of more open world type areas that you kind of get to explore. The game ranges from horror elements, which are dark and creepy and scary, to really light moments of emotion and character growth and care. It feels something like a movie in that regard, some of the cinematic aspects of this, and the fluidity of how it moves from gameplay to cinematic to gameplay is just so flawlessly, beautifully done. It really is just such a well done game overall in terms of the mechanics, the style of play. So in it, you're largely using a selection of weapons. There are light crafting elements in regards to some of the tools you use, such as bandages, Molotovs, and things like that. You can slightly upgrade your guns. I would compare it to the recent Tomb Raider titles in regards to how the crafting works. It's not too in-depth, but it's there just to kind of add an extra balance to the game. So in the game, you're moving around largely on foot, walking through these areas. You can use stealth, you can be combative, you can play in different ways, and there's different ways to come back afterwards and play again if you'd like to. You can actually play this for an even extended amount of time, as my 15-hour time was based on the fact that I was moving through it fairly quickly, whereas you could spend up to 30 hours if you're going and you're collecting and you're exploring every aspect of the world. And I take that number from another reviewer that was happy enough to provide me with those details of his particular playthrough. So moving past that aspect of this, the game is really quite fantastic. It is such a remarkable journey, and that's what it is. It is a journey across locations, across places, a tale of revenge, seeking out and trying to basically carve your way in the world after a certain traumatic event. And again, I can't really talk about some details that I'd like to, just because they are under embargo. So in the game, I thought technically this is perfect. The world is just so lively, so intense, whether it's a sunny day, a rainy day, whether you're swimming or running along buildings or deep underneath dealing with these monstrosities that are found, hidden within these old buildings. And it's just such a neat apocalyptic look at the world after this event as you explore these, lost places, these iconic buildings and areas that have just been lost to nature. But more than that, it focuses in on the characters really deeply, and like I mentioned, really aims to humanize them in interesting ways that I don't think other games have ever really done. It shows you a perspective and a style that you might not be familiar with. Now with that, I do feel that this is kind of 2 games in one, and it's hard to describe that again due to what I'm allowed to say. But it does feel like 2 whole experiences, and I think the latter half of the experience doesn't quite hit the mark from a narrative perspective. I think that part was a little weaker, and I don't think that this came together at the end as profound of an experience and a meaning and a lesson as it could have been if they would have tweaked some things. Now, that being said, that sounds like a very negative thing to say. This is still a near masterpiece of an experience. The technical aspects of what they were able to achieve in terms of the density, the realism, the characters, the cinematics, the emotion, the movement, it's just absolutely outstanding. And this is a great experience. I was gripped the whole time through. Some areas feel a little expanded, and it feels almost like they had to either change some things or cut some material, because it feels like they could have blown this out even further if they had wanted to. But what we get here is truly a stunning single-player experience. I also love the connections, like I've been mentioning, with the characters, but the fact that the characters also interact with you in interesting and natural new ways. This is some of the smartest AI I've ever seen in regards to those that are working with you. They come and they assist when you're in trouble. You can help them. They're doing their own thing. They're actively being a part of your experience. They feel like other characters. Like when you're watching a film and you see like a squad go in and deal with something, that's what this feels like. You're not really in a large group, but usually you have somebody that's with you or a part of your little tiny tight squad as you go on this journey. Even your great horse pal here, which was fantastic. And I think it's just great how you're able to have that interaction and have those others that are around you that help flesh out this story and make it matter a lot more. You care about these individuals and what happens to them. There's also a greater sense of interaction in the game. You can use items to break windows that would create sound or distract enemies. The enemies themselves, they all have names. You hear them call out when they see their fallen comrade, get injured or killed. It matters to them. And that's kind of an extra level to the humanity that is present within this game. You seeing those individuals under stress, having problems within the varying factions of the game that they've created this conflict here. So, if you're coming from the first game, I think you really do want to experience this one in regards to where they take things. You might not like where they take certain things, but you will want the completed experience of what this is. There are light puzzle elements present in this too, but for the most part they weren't any more than a few seconds of figuring something out or going to an area. As I mentioned, there are many secrets, collectibles, and hidden things of the past for you to discover if you so choose to do so. You can just work straight through the narrative if you want, or you can actually really take your time and see the full distinction of what this world presents. And I love that about apocalyptic titles. Reading the stories, seeing what happened, understanding the varying, things that were at play during this event where everything kind of fell apart. Seeing those stories and reading them is just, it's kind of a little bit depressing, but I find it enchanting in regards to making this feel like a place where there were a lot of real people involved and things didn't go well. I mean, these are The Last of Us, right? But that aside, gameplay is fantastic. It's fluid. It looks great. It feels visceral. Combat was gripping. There are so many points where I was like in close quarters, and it was intense. You don't necessarily have a lot of loot present. I played on the normal difficulty. There's a lot of different settings and accessibility things, which are fantastic to have included so that anyone can experience what this is. But yeah, you feel the gripping tension as you're like visceral combat, close quarters is really insane. And it's unsettling, and the horror aspects are really chilling. I don't think I was ever like jump scared, as to say, but there were some really chilly points in this, especially during some of the more night-oriented scenes that you get to go through. Even some of the moments where you're adventuring through certain areas and you're like, oh, the tension is unreal. And I just loved how this was one cohesive experience. This is something that we've been building towards with every game throughout this generation in regards to making something this seamless, this well done, this beautiful, this cinematically almost perfect experience. It's just fantastic. I really loved almost every moment of playing this game, the adventures you go on, the things you do, the characters you meet, the ways you battle to try to, basically survive and keep going, but then the extra context you get. I felt particularly bad for the dogs to some degree that I can't talk about, but wow, did I feel bad about that. That really stuck with me. And, just in general, this is a game you have to play. It is an experience you have to have if you're on the PlayStation. Again, some of the narrative elements I do feel kind of fall apart a little bit towards the latter half, but I don't think that those should necessarily, erase just the really key elements that make this such a compelling thing. That the first part of this revenge tale, how it works out, how it flows, you feel a sense of urgency, you feel a sense of mission. And while I don't ultimately believe that I agree with where things did flow towards and how they handled things, I did like the fact that they tried to humanize the characters. They tried to make you care about the individuals that are at play here, and they tried to make this feel like a full world that you were a part of, that you're just a character within, trying to do your thing, trying to do what you feel is right, and enjoying that mission. They play with the areas and locations you visit quite well. They have compelling characters, compelling motivations for the characters, and it's just technically stunning. Seriously, from like the thick, dense areas you visit within forests, or through certain scenes where you get to visit some different locations. Every part of this was a really remarkable sort of technical aspect that came together in such an intense way that really pushes the hardware to what I think is the max that we're gonna get. This journey across the generation with all the titles we've seen, this is what they kind of been working towards in regards to content within it. I think there are a few titles that really do hit this standard of play, and it's just kind of the story aspect of it that doesn't truly hit the mark for me to make this something that I would say is perfection or an absolute masterpiece. Technically, this is a perfect game. I can't wait to see what they do with this technology over the next generation. I just think some of the story elements could have been handled a little bit better in regards to either fleshing them out further or making them a little less bloated in terms of content and having more of a central focus on where things need to be. And I know this sounds super weirdly cryptic, but I have to be under the guidelines that I've been presented, because there's so many more things I want to talk about and kind of go over, well, not necessarily spoiling things, but just covering some of the beats of where things went, how things wrapped up, and the characters that were at play in this long journey that I went through, that I felt was very personal, very touching, very unique, and definitely one of those unforgettable moments in gaming, just in regards to really the sort of thing that they presented, the worlds, the locations, the smaller intimate details, the emotions, the character models. Again, wow, seriously. And just the way your character interacts and deals with every aspect of the world is beautiful. And that is The Last of Us Part 2.